Mace-plaining, why your team owner does nothing. And in terms of does nothing, doesn't win very much. Last week, I did a bit of an expose on the Pirates, trying to understand what the hell they're doing over there and why they can't win. And we came out, basically at the end of the day, it's Bob Nutting's fault. It's their owner's fault. It's the way that he operates and the way he operates his businesses that are the main culprit, which got me thinking, can we talk about other owners? Which got me thinking even more. And I have a couple theories, so let's get into them right now. Theory number one, you can predict your team's future success based on how its current owner made their money. Now, just to give you a little context on this, I wanted to look at, because Bob Nutting is in newspapers and he buys local newspapers. His family's been doing this for over 100 years. And what they do is they get them profitable and then they just let them sit. And that got me thinking, oh, he just likes passive income. So of course he runs his baseball team that way, which is terrible to run a baseball team. You're never going to be competitive, which they're not, ever. Every once in a while, a person like that will just run into, I don't know, like a 3-year stretch where you have the MVP in the league and you make the playoffs 3 years in a row and then never be good again. That's what happened to him. So you can predict an MVP team's future success based on how their owner made their money. And those owners go in two buckets, okay? I kind of separated them into two. One, they inherited their money from some industry, from their parents or from their family or whatever, or they were self-made and they bought their team. So they bought their team and they built it up. There's some guys that bought their team and then they became billionaires because they owned a team. That would be considered self-made because that's the business that they built. So there are a couple that way. But for the most part, it's one or it's the other. And so I wanted to see, do self-made owners do a better job overall? Is there any trends where self-made are better than inherited owners, owners that inherit their money, or vice versa? Is this a thing, or am I just like being like, that's logical? I don't really know. So it was true for Nutting, but I don't know if it's true for everybody else. And then I have a second theory. The adoption of technology and information has widened the gap in performance because I think self-made are better. And I think that the way that information is in making quick decisions, people who built their businesses are better positioned to do that than nepo owners or inherited owners. I'm not going to say nepo much here because I'm not out here I'm not trying to crap all over owners. Like, I know that people think that I want to do that, but everyone has different experiences. I don't know these people. A lot of them might be good people or normal people or whatever, right? They're just a product of their circumstances, whatever. We can get into sociology all day if we want. I'm just here to say, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and just say all these guys are doing their best, and what doing their best is just what they know. So let's just go from that. There's no evil happening. There might be somewhere, but like, I'm not going to talk about it in that way. We're going to try to keep it as baseline and default as possible so that we can just look at numbers and see if there's any correlation here between owning your team because someone gave it to you or owning your team because you bought it. And There's some stuff. All right. So first thing I did was check right now. Okay. I just wanted to know, like, currently right now, as of actually yesterday when I ran these numbers, 12 of the owners inherited them. 18 of them were self-made. Okay. The records for inherited were 268 and 269. So they're one game under 500, which means self-made were one game over 500. That's pretty even. Right? Regular season, there was nothing really there. Nothing there. Almost exactly the same. Okay? But what about the last 15 years? So what I did was I thought about what is the technology information time in baseball. 2010 was about when teams started to invest in the data collection side of scouting and stuff, right? They're trying to like do performance testing on athletes, spark testing through Nike, stuff like this. Like, can we measure how athletic people are so we're not just watching them play baseball? We can actually have some baseline numbers that allow us to project them a little bit more efficiently. That started to really get steam in 2010 and then took off in like 14, 15 with like Hawkeye and all this stuff and TrackMan. This stuff now you guys know where we are. We are in daily. People are making up pitches because they can just check a machine, right? So some owners I think handled that better than others. So I wanted to see. Let's go look at the numbers, okay? This is the tech revolution I just mentioned. So this is how the owners were kind of broken up over those 15 years. Over those 15 years, there were 45 total owners of the 30 teams. That's either inherited or teams being sold, okay? So like, for example, Hal Steinbrenner taking the Yankees over in 2008, 2009 from George. Stuff like that, that would be a swap of an owner without the team being sold, okay? So there was 15 total. So I'm doing it in ratios of self-made over inherited. So it's always self-made is always the higher number, so I'll just put it on top, okay? There's 2.5 times as many self-made teams, owners, as there was inherited owners over this time period. I hope that makes sense. So just keep that number in mind. This is how the numbers broke out. This is the winning percentage. This is division wins. This is playoff appearances. This is pennants, and this is World Series all the way at the end, okay? So winning percentage, division, championships, playoff appearances in general, pennants, and World Series. You're going to know something about some of those last numbers, all right? I think I found something. So this is playoff appearances. There was 53 by guys that inherited their teams. There was 107 by self-made owners. That comes out to about a 2.2. Okay. So playoff appearances, pretty even. Makes sense. Basically, it correlates the ratio of those owners with the ratio of teams about the same. That's about what we would expect. Okay. Now, it was hard to separate what playoff appearance, because the number of playoff teams has changed 3 times, and also the format changes like every 4 years. So it's really hard to isolate how that really helps. So I just said, okay, whatever, it's even. Oh, bag holder asks, where's the money spent on the roster? Trust me. That would be a cause. I'm looking for an effect real quick. I'm trying to see if this is real, okay? So that comes out to a 2. Division, 24 inherited, 64. Okay. Now there's 2.75 times as many self-mades as inherited. So it's slightly swinging towards self-made when it comes to winning the division, not just making the playoffs. Division winners, self-made owners tend to win them a little bit more, and this is the last 15 years. But what about pennants? The teams that go to the World Series, what's that ratio look like? 25-5. That's 5 times as many. So there has been 25 of the last 30 pennants were won by a self-made owner. What about World Series? 13 of the last 15 were won by self-made owners. That's 6.5 times as many. So what this tells me, here's a little rundown. Owners, 2.2. So we're looking, how do all of these affected, or how do they all relate to that top one? They're about the same for playoffs, and then divisions it gets a little bit skewed, and then pennants it goes crazy, and then World Series it gets double crazy. I'm like, okay. So what that tells me is when self-made owners own a team, they tend to go farther into the playoffs than other teams. And why could that be? We'll talk about that in a minute. But I was like, has it always been this way, or is this real? Or is this just like a sample size thing? Because that's important with stats. So what I wanted to do was, I was like, all right, let's take the era before that, the golden era, as they call it, in the commissioner's office, from 1980 to 2009. So I did the same things and I took out the playoffs and divisions because they don't matter. We just did pennants and World Series for these. How successful these? So in those 30 years, it was about 4 times as many. Oh, these should be flipped, by the way. These numbers are backwards. I just realized that. There was actually 622 self-made. So there's 4 times as many self-made as inherited owners over those period of time. And this only includes teams that either went to the pennant, won a pennant, or won the World Series. So the other teams didn't matter because they didn't win. I wanted the teams that won over those 30 years, okay?
I just want to say, before Arena Club, if you were trying to very actively buy, sell, trade, it was very complicated and used a lot of mail that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to do it, but I'm glad we have Arena Club now because it's a one-stop shop for everything card related.
It is. And right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or your first card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/FOUL. Use code FOUL. If you're a collector, you've got to check out Arena Club. Go get after it.
The owners, 4 times as many self-mades, but only 2.6 times as many pennants and 3.2 times as many World Series. Interesting. Much more even from 1980 to 2009. Pre-technological revolution in baseball. So I said, why could that be? Could it possibly be that owners that inherited their team benefited from experience because it was all eye test? When the game became data-driven, self-made owners, people that had to learn to build a business at that time, were better suited to use those skills to build a baseball team. People who inherited their team were not. But then you flip that on its head. It goes the other way in the 30 years prior, where people who were brought up maybe in a clubhouse, maybe in a front office, when their dad's running the team and they're just a kid hanging out, and they watch so much baseball that they act on that knowledge, and that knowledge was gold then. Having knowledge of the game of baseball with your eyes was much better for building teams in this period than the last 15 years, which would line up with analytics, wouldn't it? So I was like, when I went through, because I went through this year by year, by the way, this took forever. So I deserve a cookie for that. This took forever. When I did this, there was 2 different things going on in this time period. Specifically, from 1980 to 1989, things were crazy, and I'll show you right now. After I tell you about this. So here's a few things that could be going in. There was significantly more corporate ownership in those 30 years, meaning there were certain teams that were just owned by a company, so it's hard to tell who the owner was. So like for a while there, like the Marlins were like owned by the league. Like right now, the Braves are owned by a media company. It's hard to tell who the managing person is. So sometimes that stuff's kind of gets a little bit wishy-washy. There were a couple wins by NEPA owners, which in the first year in this period of them taking over. For example, George Steinbrenner loses. He steps back in 2008. Howell wins in 2009, but has Howell won since? So like sometimes an inherited guy gets the World Series win when it wasn't his team really. He just inherited it the first year. That happened once or twice. So that's a caveat as well. Also. From 80, this is supposed to be 80 to 89. From 80 to 89, I noticed this. 5 of the 7 World Series titles and 10 of the 16 pennants this is 83 to 89, were inherited. So in the 80s, it was inherited people winning everything. And then then the next 17, from 1990 to 2007, 17 straight World Series were won by a self-made owner. So I wanted to be like, okay, let's look at those first 10 years then of that. Let's look at 80 to 89. Because I want to know like who was winning this stuff and what were the owners doing. Owners, there was twice as many. So there's 20 at that time. Actually, this is before the expansion. So there's 28. It was 18 to 9. Pennants, 5 and 5. Pennants, 10 to 10. World Series, 5 to 5. So even though there was twice as many self-mades, inherited owners had an advantage in these 10 years. So where we start to see the shift is starting in 1990 to 2010. Those 20 years is when it starts to swing towards self-made. And then when we hit the technological breakthroughs, self-made frickin' took over. Let me put this into context for you, Okay? I'll give you a prime example of this in action. Right now, Steve Cohen is the wealthiest owner in the major leagues. Okay? We've seen stories about him over the years of kind of creating situations where other owners are a little bit afraid to go head-to-head with him, especially in free agency, because they're going to lose. Hal Steinbrenner said that. Like, God, we can't match up with this guy all the time, or we're going to lose. That's because Steve Cohen's business is hedge funds. The guy just has made deals his whole professional life. He's the richest owner because he's really good at it. Okay? When your job is to compete all the time and win, and then you buy a sports team and you have the most money, at that point you are inevitable. So it doesn't surprise me one bit that now their apparatus looks like a team that could be successful into the future and will be a powerhouse because they have built. He has made good decisions. He's made a bunch of mistakes, right? That's what anyone does when you're learning the business. But I think he's gotten a lot of those out of his system, and he is going to consistently produce winners, or he's going to be open to it. And we're not going to see rebuilds much from them anymore. But he has this skill set, right? This move quick, break stuff type skill set. Very, very, I think, modern businessy. And so when it comes to free agency, when it comes to trade deadline, he's not afraid to pull the trigger when people who inherited their team tend to move slowly on those situations because it's not how they didn't build it. They didn't fully build it. So it's just not part of how they've operated in the past. So why would they start now? When they run into a guy who is willing to make quick decisions worth millions and millions of dollars fast, they're getting railroaded. That's why the Mets are signing everybody. That's why they spent so much money, is because he just runs over the nepo owners that don't throw money around. They're just trying to hold on to things. And so we're seeing that a lot of the owners, by the way, the Dodgers, all self-made owners, same thing, they have a better understanding of how to move quickly and how quickly information can build a good sports team. And they're competitive because they were in competitive markets. The owner of the Reds is in meat packing. Nobody is disrupting the meat packing industry. He's got nothing to worry about. And so it's just business as usual. And that's why the Reds haven't won anything anytime soon. That's why Bob Nutting will never win, ever. Because he's just like, hey, give me my money and shut up. And I'm going to say it right now. There's probably a pretty clear reason why Hal Steinbrenner isn't winning a bunch of World Series anymore. He spends some money, and they made it last year. Like, they're not bad. They didn't go to being bad, but he's definitely not the shark that George was. I think that's pretty clear. And there's new kids on the block. And honestly, the success, at least the back end of the pennants in the World Series, are overwhelmingly swapped to guys that built their own businesses. And it's fascinating. So I want to know, should we go into individual teams at all? Should we talk individual teams at all? Because I want to talk about this. Like, this is fascinating. I did not know I was going to find the things I found. But it turns out that moving quick and taking information and making good decisions and bringing on people who think outside the box is much more valuable than, quote unquote, eye test traditional baseball knowledge at this point. It's just a better understanding of the game. Not that there's no value there. There is value there. It's important to have both. But the people who make decisions the fastest are winning more often, or have more conviction and really go for their things, are winning more often. And that shows up in the numbers, especially in the last 15 years. And that was Mace-plaining this week, and I had a lot of fun.